You're listening to the Primal Happiness Show, a podcast dedicated to helping you thrive in this crazy modern world. Every Tuesday, we explore the nature of how our minds really work, what exactly the human animal requires to thrive, and how we can live happier and more fulfilling lives. If you're new here and haven't yet taken our free class, then there's no better place to get a jump start on reclaiming your primal happiness. It's where we'll guide you step by step through our antidote to today's modern world. Simply head on over to primalhappiness.co/antidote to get the free class and discover how to thrive without having to move to a planet that's not so crazy as ours. But now, your host, Lian Brook-Tyler.
Hello, my beautiful people. A huge warm welcome back to the show. In today's crazy modern world, men and women are living shallow, disconnected, and unfulfilling lives. So we created the path for those who are ready to reclaim their wildness and actualize their deepest gifts. And I'm so sorry about the lack of episodes over the last 2 weeks. It's been for a number of reasons, including some strange technical issue that we had with Apple Podcasts. That's now been resolved with their help, thankfully, including our many, many years of ratings and reviews being restored. We had lost them, so very relieved to have those back. And we also have back the functionality for listeners to leave new reviews. Therefore, for all of you who have been desperately wanting to write a review, you can now go and do so. And now for this week's show. This episode is our monthly show called All the Everything, and it's where I share all the kinds of things that I've been up to and have been on my mind. And so in this episode, I dive deep into how to be yourself in difficult times. I spoke about all kinds of things, including good intentions, knee-jerk reactions and shaming, white privilege and fears and triggers, inclusion and diversity, non-separation versus spiritually bypassing, and ultimately how to take action in a way that's in alignment with who you really are and in a way that's most likely to be a force of good in the world. That sounds like something that'd be helpful to you right now. Let's jump in. Welcome to June's All the Everything. Welcome. So, I'm going to deviate slightly from the usual format that I use. So typically I will start first by talking about what I've been up to in the last month, what I've been creating, what I've been consuming, and then I'll dive straight into the topic, whatever that particular topic is. The name of the show is All the Everything, so it could literally be anything. And this month, for reasons that I'll explain in a moment, I'm not feeling that. I think I'm going to just head straight into the topic. Yeah, that feels good to me. So this All the Everything has been a bit of a question mark in my mind. So typically it's recorded on the first Friday of every month. And a number of things have been happening all at the same time that had made me question whether I wanted to do this particular show. The first part, I'm not going to go into hugely, but just to say that's kind of also been at play. I've just been working through quite a big wound with my coach at the moment. Could be actually described as kind of the core wound or the sacred wound. And so that's been driving up a lot of stuff for me at the moment. So that's definitely been at play. And then added to that is the current events around the murder of George Floyd and then everything that's driving up in our culture at the moment. And I very much have been waiting and listening, both out there, listening to what was happening out there, and then also going inwards to see what was there for me. And I'll explain a bit more about what I mean about that in a moment. And I really wanted to wait until I was clear that I could have something useful to offer before I added my voice at all. And so that has been really in question. Jonathan and I have had a couple of conversations about it over the last couple of days. Like, is this something that feels good for us to add our voice into? And if so, what is that? What feels like a helpful and aligned message for us? So that's what we've been in for the last couple of days. And then I still hadn't decided until literally half an hour ago that, okay, yes, I'm feeling still a bit of wariness, let's say, but feeling like this is the thing to do. So here we are. And one of the things, as I've been kind of sitting back and listening, what I've really been noticing out there is a number of themes, let's say, and I'm not going to necessarily do justice to these into like nice, neat themes. I'm just going to list like a lot of what I've seen. And this has been, what I'm noticing is a lot of really good intention. So, and when I'm saying good intention, I specifically mean white people with largely my friendship group are people who have an intention, a commitment to be a force of good in the world. And I'm suspecting that's very true. If you're listening to this show, you probably wouldn't be listening to that if that wasn't true for you. So I'm seeing a lot of very good intentions. And then what I'm then seeing ripple from that is people really not knowing what actually that looks like in terms of how do I do good from there? And then the reaction to whatever's been put out there, creating something else and then something else. So I've been seeing people feeling this kind of need to say something. And then whatever they're saying is going to land with someone else as being the wrong thing. And so then I'm seeing people kind of ganging up on other people who are seeming to kind of go against the grain or be less informed. A lot of not listening, a lot of kind of telling rather than listening, a lot of shaming of ourselves and others, a kind of lot of knee-jerk responses where until we've been able to kind of hold, this is true of anything really, but that kind of ability to hold ourselves in the tension and wait until it feels like we've got something that's going to be helpful. I'm not seeing lots of that. I'm seeing kind of a lot of like knee-jerk responses, which again, are completely understandable from the backdrop of all the pressure that's building for all of us. And on the flip side, the opposite can be just thinking, I'm too scared. I'm not going to say anything because either I don't want to get it wrong, and I don't want to get it wrong as in I don't want to harm people, or I don't want to get it wrong and then have heat brought on me. And often both those things are at play. And then I guess what you could call spiritually bypassing. I've seen, I'm in a number of kind of what you could call spiritual groups, spiritual communities. And so again, with really good intention, you'll see people say, I don't know, well, you know, we're all one anyway. We're kind of all the same under the skin. And then other people dive in and say, you know, that's spiritually bypassing and does nothing to help. And so these swirls keep on happening. And what I then see is it's almost like an exhaustion set in where people have a sense of like, oh, well, I'm damned if I do, I'm damned if I don't. Therefore, what do I do at this stage? Do I just do nothing? And I saw a really good example of this the other day. It's a very small example, but I just thought this kind of as a metaphor captures so much of what I'm seeing at the moment, which is there was last Tuesday, there was that kind of blackout Tuesday where people put their Facebook or Instagram photos to black. And then the very next day, I saw a post shared where someone was really criticizing that, saying that it was actually, it wasn't authorized. I don't know if apparently there is a movement that kind of is behind these blackouts, and that wasn't an authorized move on their part. And actually all it served to do was kind of take away from the conversation. Like when you've got a kind of feed of blacked out profile pictures, it is filling up space that could be used for actually really helpful dialogue. And I just thought, oh my goodness, I know several of my friends did black out their Facebook photo or Instagram photo. And then I was thinking, oh gosh, and then they're going to see that and then think, what have I done? I've actually done the bad thing and I meant to do the right thing. And I was just watching all of this thinking, gosh, however good your intentions are right now, and again, I suspect because you listen to this, you're someone whose intentions are good, it's very hard to sort out what that would actually look like, what that would sound like, how to be in these times. And so, having taken this time to listen to all of this that's going on and be in conversation with people one to one too, it felt like that could be something helpful for me to speak into. Again, not that I'm an authority on this, but the thing I am an authority on is the journey into who we really are and who we are from a spiritual perspective and who we really are from a soul perspective. And it was when Jonathan and I were talking earlier, we realized like that's something that no matter what's going on out there, we feel very strongly that the alignment with who we are at that deepest level serves us no matter what. Like returning there will always serve us, will always help us to be the gift of the world that we came here to be. So it's from that place I'm going to talk. And really what I'm going to talk about today is true, I guess, in anything, any situation that's showing up. So I'm saying this not just from a perspective, what I think could be helpful in this current dynamic, but really whatever's happening, this is true. And I think this is also something that feels a powerful time to have this conversation, because on the one hand, there is this very real need to create transformation here. I am very committed to creating a world that works for everyone, a world that is fair, it is safe, it is something that feels like a world of possibility and opportunity. And we are, because of who we are and who we see that we can have the greatest impact with working with, they typically are the misfits, are kind of one-to-one clients. Hopefully any of them that are listening to this aren't going to take offense with this description, but I suspect it will ring true. Our one-to-one clients generally are people who would describe themselves as being a bit different to the norm. They're the deep thinkers, the magical ones, the creators, the dreamers. And they are likely to have had a lifetime of experience of being shown in one way or another and literally told quite often that they need to conform, that they need to follow the tide, they need to fit in. And what we've seen more and more deeply over the years of working with people like this, which, you know, Jonathan and I very much would consider ourselves fellow misfits with, that isn't going to be conforming, and going with the tide isn't likely to be what's going to create lives of meaning. And the reason that's important is I truly believe that empowering those misfits to create lives of meaning is real medicine for the world. People who have come here with, I mean, we're all a gift to the world. I absolutely believe that. Those people who have those kind of like such a degree of difference that they do stand out, they do struggle to fit in, they have very specific, unique medicine that gets diluted when they try to fit in, when they try to conform. And when it's something like is happening in the current climate, likely, again, these people really care. The misfits typically have huge hearts, know they've come here to do good, know they've come here to be a gift, even though sometimes that voice can be very, very quiet and drowned out by the fear of trying to fit into this world. But because they have this strong sense of wanting to create a fair world, wanting justice, they can be, and I say they, and I include myself in this, can be very pulled by whatever injustice is currently happening. It's very easy to be pulled to conform to whatever the, let's say, mainstream agreed response is to that. And I'm saying that with no sense of like, that means the mainstream's wrong or the mainstream's right. Often there's hardly, I mean, even if we look at the current conversation around anti-racism, I think it's quite hard to even boil that down to like, there is this one response to it. Like, it's all over the place. I've seen so many different responses to it. It's even hard to boil that down to like, this is the one right response. But even if we have a sense of, this is what I should be doing right now, and even if that is led from a place of, very good intention and likely to have a very good impact, I still believe it's really important for everyone, again, particularly the misfits, to pause and go inwards and see what our role is in this particular situation, this particular climate, and not assume that whatever the current narrative is either the right one generally, but also the right one for us. And I'm aware, as I say any of this, as I went back earlier, I'm seeing, whatever someone says right now, or even if they don't say anything, they're likely to be, likely to trigger people, they're likely to be criticized. And so I'm saying all of that, speaking directly into a space that I know I'm also likely to be criticized for. And I'm doing so because I truly believe that this is my medicine. This is what I've come here to do. And so I really get that some of what I'm saying is going to go against the narrative, and it feels as though that's still what I'm here to speak to. Okay, I'm going to take a breather and then start to detangle some of what I'm seeing and some of the things that I think could be useful to look at. And I'm also going to talk directly into some of the conversations I've been in around racism, and what I'm noticing show up that could be helpful directions for us to go in. Okay, so So first of all, I'm going to say, if we again just look at this more generally for the moment, rather than the current climate, and look at, if I'm going to give you this context, I'm not saying this is like 100% true, scientifically proven, you must believe this, but this is my context, that we are all a gift to the world. If we came here and were in deep connection to spirit and to our soul, from there we can only be a gift to the world. I that's my context. Feel free to meet me there if that's something that resonates for you. And then what gets in the way of us being that fully expressed gift is a combination of things, but I'd say typically the two biggies are cultural conditioning. And so all the ways that we've been shown that it's not welcome or safe to be our fullness, and we need to instead restrict ourselves and fit into certain boxes and shapes. And then our wounds. And so that will be likely things that have happened to us, usually in childhood, that have, again, created this restriction, this sense of being this way in the world or opening to this kind of experience is dangerous. And of course, this all goes on at a subconscious level. Therefore, both those two things, the conditioning and the wounds, create this kind of armoring, this closing, from which it's very difficult to be the gift that we came here to be. And the good news is, I don't just believe this, I've seen this over and over with my own eyes. We can absolutely do the work to free ourselves to a very great extent from both. We can rewild, we can reclaim those wild selves that we really are from cultural conditioning. We can reclaim that gold of ourselves, this like truest sense of who we are, and expand through our wounds. And another aspect of that I think is really important, and again came up in a conversation about spiritual bypassing with Sarah Sanderson, a woman of color who I've been in conversation about something that's actually separate to this, that kind of then drifted into this wider conversation about racism. And I'm going to share some of the conversations she and I had in a moment. But the thing that came very clearly as I was talking to her was, this is an important part of this too. Not to go all the way over to, well, it's all one. We're all made of the same stuff, therefore this is a non-issue. But to the more we are bringing ourselves back into an understanding of our non-separation, recognizing that can be so, and we're here having a human experience, and that has very real impacts. We can live in the paradox of both, and actually, the more we can do so, the more force for good that we are. So let me just now go through a little bit on each of those, what I see, how I guess we can do the work to free ourselves in each of those. So when it comes to, and this really, I'd say both our cultural conditioning and our wounds, both are likely to create shadows, as in parts of ourselves, our expression get placed in shadow. And then they're going to be out of our sight. They're in our blind spot. So we're not going to know this. But a really good clue will be when we notice we're activated. And another word we could give to that is when we notice we're triggered, or when we notice that we're scared. And when we haven't done any sense of kind of raising our awareness and attuning ourselves to like what's going on in these physical bodies, that can be elusive to see. We're going to be so thinking everything's happening out there to us. It's going to be very hard to notice what's triggering us internally. But of course, this is part of this raising of awareness that we can do that allows us to start to see more and more of that and recognize like, oh yes, this is in here. This is for me. So an example of that I just loved that came up in conversation with Sarah that I mentioned just now. We were talking about, this is interesting. I mean, I'm feeling in two minds whether to share this. No, I'm going to with a caveat. So, yeah, I'm going to. The reason I'm stalling, it actually is a really perfect example of everything that we're talking about here. And yeah, I've got this kind of slight reservation that in doing so, by sharing this example, it's almost example also of me saying, look, I can't be racist because look at what I've been doing over here. And so I want to name all of that. I'm going to share this with you, knowing it's going to almost like make me look at me, I'm over here doing my work, and here's proof. And hey, there it is. And it isn't my intent. The reason I'm sharing this with you isn't that. It's so I can give you the fullness of the example. So with the last Waking the Wild Feminine circle that I led, which was back in the spring, I had a vision before I even opened the doors to enrollment. I really wanted to make sure there is a much greater inclusion of women of colour in that particular circle. I realised that I have a vision, which is to bring women, I mean, people in general, but my work particularly with Waking Wild Feminine is really to bring women back to their wildness, back to who they really are, and allow them to be this like gorgeous express version of themselves. And it occurred to me that the previous Waking the Wild Feminines had largely been filled with white women. And when I realised that, I thought, well, I'm not really fulfilling my vision if me supposedly supporting women to rewild themselves and be more of who they are in the world, if it's only this kind of section of women. That's not actually me being in alignment with my vision at all. So that's where the intention came from. And it was more than intention, it was very much commitment to make the next Wake the Wild Feminine more diverse, which happened in a number of ways. Some very intentional, kind of reaching out to women of color who I felt that, it might just be a conversation between the two of us, might make that feel safer and more welcoming to them. And some just happened like magic. Again, I think that's the power of intention right there. I think when we have a really clear vision and commitment to something, somehow, we do need to put some action in there too, but somehow that also just seems to happen like magic. So I'd gone from the previous circles of 8 being, if not wholly white women, it certainly was the vast majority, to the last one was 50% women of color, which felt, so much more in alignment with that vision that I had. So that was actually the conversation. It just happened that the conversation I was having with Sarah about that, just by pure chance, happened to happen at this same time as all the conversations about race and racism and all of this happened at the exact same time. So it's been a really interesting thing that she and I were in that conversation, and then all of this was happening out in the world and kind of kept giving me this opportunity to sort of come back and sort of see, well, this is interesting. This can't be a coincidence. I'm like, what's here for me that applies more widely? Anyway, so going back to what I was saying about our shadows and noticing when we're activated, I was asking Sarah, what can I do that's going to allow Wake the Wild Feminine to feel, I guess, safer, more appealing to women of color? Because I have this ongoing vision that that's not going to be a one-off. This is, for future Wake the Wild Feminines, they will be just as diverse. And then she sent me some questions to almost like tune in to like what's really going on in here. And I loved this. It was it spoke to me at such a deep level beyond, I have, this is work. When I say work, the work that everyone's currently talking about to, anti-racism kind of work is something that I've been committed to and spent time on over the last few years. So I wasn't expecting, when Sarah then asked me the questions, for me to kind of get this sense of like, oh, ouch, yeah, I've not seen that before, but it really did. And which is, again, going back to when we notice ourselves be triggered, that's a real sign there's something here for us. And so I want to share with you some of the questions that she asked. So as for having a diverse audience and participants on courses, I would say from an authenticity point of view, that will match your circle of friends. And then she asked a couple of questions, which is where I really started to feel this like, if you picture a dinner party at home, how diverse is it? If it was a garden party of more guests, how diverse is it? If you threw a renewal of wedding vows party, how diverse is the invite list? And those questions really gave me pause, because I felt like a whole mixture of things come up. I mean, I'm going to share some of them with you, not with a sense of like, these are in any way right or justifiable. I'm just being really honest with you, like what came up in me as I read those. And there was a kind of real like bodily felt sense of, I guess if you boil it down, it would be fear. And ultimately that's probably really any time we're activated in that kind of way, it's ultimately fear. But it wasn't as obvious to me in that moment. It was kind of almost like an indignation, like, oh, how? Oh gosh, like almost like I'm being accused of something, which of course Sarah wasn't doing at all. But I'm being accused of something that I'm not, and I feel simultaneously the need now to list all of my friends who are people of color, and at the same time say, but this isn't important. Like, the reason my friends are like this or like this is because of, I don't know, circumstance, not because of choice. And therefore, what the hell's that got to do with people who join my courses? And all this happened like very in the moment, just to be clear. I'm breaking this down as if this was like a really long thought out process, but it really wasn't. And but what I really loved about this was, firstly, it really showed that I was raised in by hippies who, couldn't have been less racist, let's put it that way. And I definitely, up until a few years ago, would have just said, like, I'm the least racist person ever. And it really wasn't until I did the work to kind of shine light into areas that, again, we likely all have these blind spots. It was only as I did the work to uncover those blind spots, I started to see that more deeply and realize like how systemic it is, how it's kind of just part of my lens that does require this work to uncover. And then it really showed me, by Sarah asking me those questions, whoa, there's still shadow there. That's so interesting, because if this was a different topic that I had no shadow on, I wouldn't have had that response. I wouldn't have had that response of kind of defensiveness if I had no shadow left there. So that for me was, I think the questions more broadly are amazing. I'll just list some others because they might be more universally helpful too. Other things to look at might be, have you made a commitment to be an ally for people of colour? Do you acknowledge the racist water you're swimming in and the white lens of privilege the world is seen through? Do you own what the privilege has provided for you and notice how those same, perhaps simple opportunities have not been granted to people of colour? So on all of those, again, because I've done my work, I felt like, yeah, absolutely. I can answer a yes to all of those. Don't feel a trigger. But those first ones I really did. And so for me, I'm giving this as an example again because it speaks so directly into this current dynamic. But honestly, no matter what was happening in the world, if we're open to have conversations, be in the world from this perspective of what do I notice going on internally with me? What can I notice is creating that trigger, that sense of like, how dare you? Or I'm not like that, whatever that is for you. It's such a great indication. There's shadow there and something that would be really, really worthwhile bringing into the light, not just for your sake, but for the world's sake, for everyone's sake. So that's an example. And of course, that could happen in any kind of situation. It could be a conversation between, I don't know, you and your partner, or you and your children, or you and your neighbor. But anytime we're willing to actually take a look at our own response, our own triggers, we are already a long way to starting to reclaim the gold of who we are. Let's just take a quick sip and then move into the next thing. So I'm going to share now a bit more about what I was saying earlier about that connection to spirit. And again, take into account this very real risk of turning something that is really helpful into something that is bypassing. And there's a real nuance between the two. And I think even just to be aware that we are likely, because we're human, to err towards the bypassing. And so really holding that on our awareness, not as a fear kind of, oh my goodness, I must stay away from the bypassing, but just to recognize like it's likely to happen. And the more loving awareness you can bring to that tendency, the more likely you're to spot it when it happens. So as I said, I'm a member of lots of different kind of what you could call spiritual communities, spiritual Facebook groups. And I've been seeing a lot of this go down where white people had been saying things like, well, if we're all one, do we really need to be talking about race? Do we need to be talking about any of this stuff? Surely, if we all just realize that we're the same, this wouldn't be an issue. And then because again, the types of communities they're in, there would be a lot of agreement. Oh, yes, so that is how it is. And then a few voices. And in one example I can think of, memorably, the main voice that was pointing out how problematic this was a Black woman. And I was just watching this whole dynamic play out, thinking, gosh, this is, again, like it's a like fractal of a bigger picture at play. This isn't just one conversation in one Facebook group. This is something that is showing up in all sorts of other conversations. And so it was another conversation that Sarah and I had. And what was interesting was Sarah could really see the very real benefit of understanding our kind of non-separation, but not using it as a reason not to do the work to create a world that is actually fair and safe for everyone. And again, it's kind of paradoxical that it requires a lot of us to be able to hold both. And I'm going to read a reply that Sarah made in Marie Forleo's group. So there's been quite a lot of, I'm not going to say too much about this because I actually don't know the detail and I could easily say something that's not true, but I'm aware there's been some controversy. I feel like whatever word I'm going to pick isn't going to really do it justice. But again, because I don't know very much about it, I don't want to name it too much. But there was a lot of people upset with Marie Forleo and her team's handling of conversations about this whole anti-racism conversations that play at the moment. And then I think Marie Forleo did a video talking to it. And then this was Sarah's reply in response. And again, anything I'm sharing here is with Sarah's agreement I can share, just to be clear. I'm not sharing things that she hasn't said I can. Appreciate the live stream. I see you. You are not other, as it's not possible. The belief in otherness is at the root of all of this. Difference in appearance and form doesn't mean other. And yet all of life's different appearances have been placed in made-up hierarchies and systems built to favour certain people. Until the belief in otherness is looked at, I can't see how those systems will ever really change. In the past few days, I've actually seen more examples of the belief in otherness stroke separation being presented. It's great people are waking up to the symptoms, such as white privilege, but if it's not looked at alongside the belief in otherness stroke separation, I'm not sure what will change. You are me, cleverly disguised as you. And I love the way that Sarah described that as alongside. And I think that's alongside the belief in otherness stroke separation. So yes, wake up to the symptoms of things like white privilege and look at this alongside this illusion that we have of separation. And this is, again, for someone a white woman who has benefited from white privilege, this is a very hard conversation for me to speak into. That's why I'm so happy to be able to share Sarah's take on this and how Sarah's seeing it. And I when she said that, I was like, oh yes, I feel the truth in that. And it's something I guess I was skirting around because it felt like, again, it's so easy to tip over into spiritual bypassing, but by avoiding this being part of the overall everything that's at play, we are throwing the baby out of the bathwater. In order to not be able to look at the spiritual aspect of this at all for fear of spiritually bypassing, possibly is actually creating more separation and more harm. So I don't think there's anything more I can say on that apart from recognizing that I think for all of us, understanding that at the kind of deepest sense of us, we are made of the same stuff. And there's many, many paths to feeling that deep sense of ourselves in that way. And I would never say, it has to be this kind of path or that kind of path. There's so many. But what I would say is I've seen over and over again, and definitely more deeply again over the last year, that it really is something that has real benefit when we're able to see ourselves with both lenses, the lenses of us being these just beautiful, unique works of art, which I'm going to get to in a moment, and us as these this ocean of gorgeousness. Like both can be held at once when we're able to hold that level of paradox and not use one or the other to dismiss what actually is also really helpful for us. So I don't think there's anything more I can say on that other than I say all of that with that very big kind of like neon light. Don't use that as an excuse to spiritually bypass. And it's so easy to do. So easy to do. So hopefully I've made that part clear. Right, let me just have a look at where I want to go to next. So this, as I just alluded to, this understanding of ourselves as these, if we see the kind of like that Rumi quote of we're not, the ocean and drop ones. I'm going to do a terrible paraphrase of it, kind of like we're not drops in the ocean, we're the ocean and the drop, that kind of thing. And again, we are drops. We're both. We're the ocean and we're the drop. And what I'm seeing, the more we can hold that sense of yes with the ocean, and yes, that doesn't diminish the fact, like I'm also in this moment, this drop, and this drop has certain unique qualities. And the more I'm able to do the work to bring the fullness of myself out of shadow and be that in the world, the more of the gift I came here to be, I can actually be. And so this really brings me to the last thing I think is so helpful in, again, navigating any territory at all. It's instead of being shamed or pulled into responding according to what looks like it could be the safest thing. And again, there's a real illusion there. The example I gave earlier about the blackout profile pictures, it can often seem that like the thing we need to do is the safe thing. And then often that's an illusion. It turns out not to be the safe thing or the right thing or the good thing. What I've seen over and over again can be relied upon and trusted is understanding like who we really are and what's for us. And that, again, usually isn't a kind of simple decision like, yay, this is who I am, I'm going to be that. Again, a lot of this is a path that we're walking. And sometimes that's going to be more available than others. But what I do know is it's more available to us the more that we make a commitment to actually go inwards and listen. And there's many, many ways of doing that too. But it's only going to happen from that place of us being willing to see ourselves as these kind of wise, unique beings who can meet the needs of the moment in the way that's going to be most powerful, do the most good. It comes from that belief as ourselves in that way. And when I go back to the example that I gave earlier, which again, I was a bit kind of conflicted whether to describe that to you, the conversations I was in with Sarah about Wake the Wild Feminine. That to me is an example of my deep sense. Like I didn't choose to have that vision for Wake the Wild Feminine because anyone out there was telling me to. And in fact, it's not a vision that I shared with anyone, I believe, apart from Jonathan. I don't think I actually told anyone else that was my vision until after the fact. And even after the fact, I hadn't told anyone really until this moment. And that I think is really where I'm wanting you to look, not at my example here, but how the more attuned we are to our own vision and how we can bring that into the world in a way that is, again, I just see that over and over again, where we're coming from, who we really are, the gold that we are, it's only ever like loving and inclusive and good. I never seen that be any other way. And when we have that trust in ourselves, we will do the thing that we were uniquely here to do. There's no one else in the world, for example, that's leading Wake the Wild Feminine that could have had that specific vision, but you'll have your own version of that. And it might not look like something on the outside that anyone might recognize. People may not even know about it. And that doesn't matter. And there is I guess, along with all of this work of being who we came here to be, courage needed to be in the intensity of that, knowing that people are likely to judge you for not doing the mainstream thing or seeming not to do anything. Until I've just shared that, probably there's lots of people that thought, well, what are you doing? Because right now, non-action and non-speaking is, that is an action too. So from there, I think recognize, like, any time that we're being willing to be ourselves, there's going to be people who don't like that think it's the wrong thing to do. And that's why, again, having that sense of being able to return to something deeper, something we can trust to guide ourselves. Because otherwise, who are you going to listen to? At the moment, there are voices saying almost every single thing you could possibly say on this topic and how to respond to it. Are you going to listen to them? Or are you going to listen to them? Or are you going to listen to them? Or are you going to listen to them? That's a choice. So rather than that, why not just listening deeply what's for you? Recognizing part of that is going to be doing the work to see where you're in shadow, to see where you are reacting fearfully, reacting defensively to the world. Okay, so I think I've covered everything roughly I want to talk about. I want to leave you with a quote from it's from Mr. Rogers. I watched his film recently. I think it's like A Beautiful Neighborhood, I think it's called. And oh my goodness, I absolutely fell in love with him. And there was a quote that I saw of his that I just think speaks to this so beautifully. Give me a moment. Actually, there's several quotes I could. I feel like actually I've got 4 here that I'm trying to choose between. I might give you 2. One of them is, you rarely have time for everything you want in this life, so you need to make choices. And hopefully your choices can come from a deep sense of who you are. And that to me is a kind of summing up in a nutshell everything that I'm trying to say here. Like, when we're making choices from that place, like, what's aligned for me? What's going to create the most power in the world? What's going to create the most good in the world? That's where to make the choices from. That's sovereignty as far as I see it. And then I'm going to read one more. Listening is where love begins. Listening to ourselves and then to our neighbours. So that's something that I think we are not generally that good at. And I include myself in that. This is something that I've increasingly seen the impact of when we're not listening. And again, first and foremost to ourselves, that's the place we listen least. But then from that place of not being able to listen to ourselves, we can't help but project that on the world and not be able to listen to the world either. So this starts with being able to listen deeply, deeply, deeply to ourselves, what's for us. And from there, start to listen deeply to what's being said out there in the world. Think that's everything I wanted to say. I've actually no idea how long I've been talking, but I think that's everything for me. So if there's anything you want to ask me, again, I'm really aware that it's so easy to talk into the space right now and create more harm. The moment we start speaking and not listening, that's a potential. And I really welcome anything that you would like to share with me, that hearing me share my sense of this, like, what was the impact on you? I'd love to know. If you would like to listen to more conversations like this and you haven't caught up with our podcast before, that's at primalhappiness.co/podcast. And also come join our group. The great place to meet like-minded people, and that's at facebook.com/group/primalhappiness. And I think that's it for today. I don't feel the need to share anything else, but thank you so much for listening and for watching. If you're watching this live, have a wonderful weekend. Lots of love. Mwah. Bye-bye. So that's all for this month. I would love to know what you took from this show. It's been the Facebook Live version of this has been one of my most watched videos for quite some time. So it's clearly meeting the needs of the moment in some way or other. So I'd love to know what you took from it. And a great place to share that would be the Primal Happiness Facebook group. And the link for that is facebook.com/group/primalhappiness. And as ever, I'd also just love to have your feedback more generally, any questions, topic suggestions for future shows. You can share all of that in the group. And if you'd like to join me live for the recording of next month's show, you'd be really welcome. I love to have people join me live. In fact, that's why I record them that way rather than just talking into a microphone on my own. So if you like our Facebook page, and that's facebook.com/primalhappiness, watch out for the show airing live on the first Friday of every month. I was doing that at 10 a.m. UK time. I'm not sure going forward if it will be 10 a.m. I will post there when I know. It might be that I start to do it a bit later in the day, but I think it will still be the first Friday of every month. If you would like to get notes and links for anything I spoke about this week, hop on over to the show notes, and they're at primalhappiness.co/episode 283. If you don't want to miss out on next week's episode, head on over to Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, or your Android or iOS app of choice. Hit subscribe, and then just like magic, you'll get each episode straight to your device as soon as they come out. And as I said earlier, we are now open for ratings and reviews. So if you have left one in the past, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate that. And if you haven't, please go do so. Not only does it just like fill my heart with joy, it's also a wonderful way for new listeners to get to find out about the show and to see if it's for them. So if you're going to go do that, thank you in advance. I really appreciate you. Thank you so much for listening. You've been wonderful. Catch you again next Tuesday.